Hello, Shalom Chaverim, and welcome again to Lesson 31 of Learning Biblical Hebrew. We're going to continue now in Genesis. We have a selection of verses in Genesis chapter 2, and then we'll move into Genesis chapter 3. All very interesting verses, great verses, and very rewarding to dig deeply into. So let's begin. So we're going to look at Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, and I've divided it into two halves. Here is A, the first part of the verse. Vayitzer Yahweh Elohim et ha'adam rafir min ha'adama. Now, I haven't done the letter by letter translation here. I've left that up to you now. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One is it always made a mess anyway. Another is that I was a little bit inconsistent with it. There are different ways to do it, so you might have a preferred way. But thirdly, my recommendation is that you wean yourself off these letter by letter translations anyway and just get used to reading the Hebrew characters themselves. I think it's a much better way to do it. So here we go. Here's the word-by-word translation. And he formed Yahweh God, object, this is the object marker, the man, dust from the ground. So, Yetzer is often used of the work of a potter. So, I've translated here formed. Yahweh Elohim, typical Hebrew order, verb first, then subject, then object. So Yahweh God is the subject. He formed, object, the man. And rapir means dust. And it's the instrument, it's the thing that God uses, and no other word is needed to go with it. We'd have to say from dust or using dust, but in Hebrew you can just plonk the word straight there. He formed the man dust, min from ha'adamah, from the ground. Now notice the similarity between Adam, man, and Adamah, meaning ground. By the way, the traditional emphasis in Hebrew is nearly always on the last syllable. So Adam and Adamah. And the similarity between these two words is played on several times in this account. And here's the first time we see that the man is formed from the ground. The Adam is formed from the Adamah. So that's what we see here, which was also mentioned in chapter 1, verses that we haven't looked at, but it's repeated again here. Now, just a word about this divine title. Now, this double title, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh God, is consistently used in Genesis 2 and 3 a total of 20 times. And interestingly, the main place where it's not used, this full divine title, is chapter 3 verses 1 to 5, the dialogue between the woman and the snake. So the snake is perhaps a little reluctant to honor God with this full title. But interestingly, this full title, while being used 20 times in these two chapters, Genesis 2 and 3, is only used one other time in the Pentateuch, at Exodus chapter 9 verse 30, and only 15 other times in the rest of the Old Testament. But it's an interesting expression that God is both creator and Israel's covenant partner. This is a comment by Wenham in the Word Biblical Commentary. So I guess he's meaning that the Elohim is the God, the creator, and Yahweh is the personal name of God. So these two names used together bring out these two aspects of God's character, the creator and the personal God of Israel. So here we have the translation, and Yahweh God formed man out of dust from the ground. So I've added out of there, the instrument, the afer. Okay, so that's the first half of the verse. I'll put that up there, and here we have the second part of the verse. Vayipach be'apai nishmat chaim vayehi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. And again, I haven't done the letter by letter, but we come down to the word by word. So, and he breathed. This word meaning breathe, and the what here means and this Y letter here means third person singular. And he breathed in apau, his nostrils, in nostrils, his. Nishmat, breath, that means breath. And it would normally have an H ending, but this T ending is because it's what's called a construct form, and it's linked with the next word. So in English we express that with the word of. So I've written of here and put it in brackets because the Hebrew doesn't actually have a word corresponding to of, but the fact that it's in this linked form. Technically it's called a construct chain. We talked about it earlier, and it's mentioned on the special sheet that we have. So he breathed, subject is God, in his nostrils the breath of life, Vayehi, and was the man to nefesh. Well, this is often glossed soul, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. I've written down here person, and chaya, live. So this is a common way of saying became. They say he was to. The old King James Bible would have translated this unto, but using these two words together, it corresponds to what in English we would say became. The man became a living person. Then he breathed into his nose the breath of life, and the man became a living person. So, nefesh, it's often said to mean soul, but this is a big approximation. You remember I talked about first approximations? Well, in fact, this isn't even a really very good approximation, because the Hebrew word nefesh has a range of meanings, and none of them really corresponds to what we think of in English as soul. So in English, soul means kind of the disembodied you, but that's not even one of the meanings of this word nefesh. The primary meaning of it is perhaps throat or neck, if you consider the primary meaning, or some might say the literal meaning, goes back to the actual physical thing that it means. So physically, it means throat or neck. But from there it branches out to mean appetite or desire. And from there it branches out to mean life or self or person. And I wonder if this goes back to a belief that the throat is a central part of the person. So anyway, the word has quite a surprising range of meanings, and soul, at least as we think of it in modern English, isn't one of them. And I have an interesting quote here from a writer named Martin Goodman, who says, in the Hebrew Bible, man was seen as an animated body rather than an incarnated soul. An individual did not have a body. He was a body, animated by the life principle. So that's from a book called Rome and Jerusalem by Martin Goodman. But interestingly, the Latin word used here to translate nephesh is anima, from which we get animate. So, yes, so Goodman said an animated body. And we might say a living person. That's the translation that I've chosen here. And that actually comes from the New Living Translation. The man became a living person. Now, animals are also described as nefesh chaya. For example, chapter 2, verse 19. But only mankind has the nishmat chayam, the breath of life, breathed into him directly from God's own breath. So there we see the uniqueness of mankind in this very beautiful and poetic description of God creating man, the first man.